Hi everyone, my name is Michael Fetter, class of 2009. I'm here today to talk about managing the cabin fever many of you watching this video are probably experiencing right now, especially those of you with kids at home, maybe kids of various ages. You might all be on one floor of your apartment for a few days already, wondering how in the world am I going to stay sane throughout this extended social distancing process. This is something I have been thinking a lot about, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background so you can understand why. I earned a PhD in clinical psychology from St. John's University, and I'm now a clinical assistant professor at the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry in the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. And I'm also an attending psychologist at Bellevue Hospital in the Children's Psychiatric Emergency Program. And I also have a private practice here in the city where I focus on parenting and helping parents manage difficult situations with their kids. So as you can guess, this is something I've been thinking a lot about and talking to a lot of families about over the past few days. So I want to give you some tips and some skills that might be helpful. And while no particular skill is going to make everything amazing and solve everything that's going on, it may help make your home life just a little bit more tolerable and a little bit easier. And I'll start with something that you can do as a family every single morning as soon as everybody wakes up. And that is to remind yourselves why we're doing this. Why are we taking these unprecedented social distancing steps? And what a lot of families I work with have been telling me is that it's quite helpful in that first few moments when everyone's awake and coming together to remind themselves that by staying home right now, it's the equivalent of being the Hatzalah guy that runs into someone's house to save them from a heart attack. Right now, what we are doing is saving lives. And to picture yourself as someone that's on the front lines saving lives, that bit of meaning or focus can really help kids have a better understanding of why we're doing this and feel a little bit more in control of the situation, which can be quite helpful. The other thing that can be really helpful is to maintain a clear, consistent schedule every single day. And for those of you whose kids are in Ramaz, having the remote learning process can help with that because you've already got some amount of structure built in each day. But of course, there's still going to be some more downtime than usual. There are no extracurricular activities, there's really no travel time anymore. So there's a lot of dead time that can be used to just sit around, complain, not do much of anything. So coming up with a list of things to do in those transition moments, let's say between one piece of remote learning to the other, or between meals, or anything like that, can be quite helpful. So that can include setting up a 5-minute meditation setting, or a quick 10 minutes of cleaning up around the house. Just anything that gives you a little bit of purpose and is built in to the schedule. Because we know that when families and when kids are on clear schedules where they know exactly what's going to happen, and even if it's things they don't even necessarily love, like chores, if they know it's there, that consistency can really reduce a lot of the anxiety they might otherwise be feeling. Because the most important thing to avoid is feeling that every day is just rotating into the next day and there's really no clear beginning or end to any day. So having a clear bedtime, wake up time, daily routine with all of those transition activities built in can be quite helpful. Another thing that a lot of families have been telling me about is that with everyone cooped up together, tensions tend to rise more quickly than usual. There may be more arguments, more yelling, all of those things which are completely expected given that everyone is in really tight quarters, almost as if everyone's on a submarine together. So to help prevent that, I like to recommend families create what I call a de-escalation plan. The idea here is that if any family member, so it can be literally any family member, notices either themselves or a different family member starting to get angry or to yell or to get frustrated, they can yell out a code word that everyone's already agreed upon. And it could be something goofy like pineapple. Really, it could be any kind of funny, silly word that's not a word you're normally going to say, or not one that come up too often. And when everyone hears that word, everyone has to go to their own corner. So maybe one person chooses that they're going to go to their room, one person chooses to go to the kitchen, one person goes to the living room. The idea is that everyone ahead of time has picked out what the code word is, where they would go if they heard the code word, and 5 minutes worth of relaxing activities that they would do while separated from everyone else. So that could be watching a silly YouTube video that they have queued up on their phone. It could be playing with a squishy or some sort of fidget toy. It could be reading. It could be coloring in a coloring book or reading a comic book. It could be anything that you, as an individual, find relaxing for yourself. So the idea is that when someone would say the code word, everyone goes to their appointed corners, does their 5 minutes of activities. Someone has set either an Alexa or an alarm on their phone or even a good old-fashioned egg timer. And when the alarm goes off, everyone comes back together to finish discussing the topic. Because we don't want this to be a way to avoid whatever the topic was or to get out of some responsibility. Instead, the idea is that this helps you manage when frustration, fight or flight instinct, back brain activation, when all of those things start to rise, that you can notice them, manage them, come back together and have a cool, rational discussion using your front brain to solve whatever the difficult topic was. And I'd actually recommend that families practice this when things are actually quite calm, and to get some practice, just like you would practice a fire drill rather than waiting till an actual fire to figure out where your fire exits are. The other piece I recommend families build into that is a reward program. So having kids earn checks or stickers or points towards something that they would like to earn is really, really useful, especially now, because this may be something that you used when your kids were younger and maybe hasn't been as useful as they get older. But especially now when things are more stressful and more anxiety producing, and kids are just stuck at home, they may feel like they have less opportunities to get praise or reward that they might otherwise be getting at school or with friends. So building in ways for them to earn points and prizes, and the prize can be something as simple as deciding what's the dessert is that night for dinner, or which main course is for dinner, which may be limited by the availability in the supermarket that day, but at least having some sort of choice and some sort of ability to choose can really, really help kids feel less anxious. Another thing that can be really helpful for kids is setting up times for them to play some sort of group game with friends. So maybe if they were on a sports team, and even if they can't be playing sports anymore, maybe they're playing a virtual basketball game with their friends. And of course, while many families try to minimize screen time, in this time, it's of course understandable that there's probably going to be more screen time than usual. So while it's of course important to have rules and regulations around what kind of screen time is allowed, building in opportunities for social contact with friends via Skype or FaceTime or other ways of at least seeing their friends virtually can be really helpful. And the last piece that I'll talk about, which can be something especially difficult for parents, is how to handle when kids ask them, are you going to be okay? Are you going to get this coronavirus? Are you going to get sick? Is grandma and grandpa going to get sick? These are really hard questions to answer. And of course, there is no right answer because none of us have crystal balls. So what I always like to recommend to families is to take that question and shift it by saying, well, this is why we're doing everything that we're doing now, so that all of us stay as safe as possible, because I intend to be around a very long time and to care for you for a very long time, and I'm doing everything I can to stay safe because I care so much for you. And by shifting the question to that focus, it can give kids that care and focus and compassion that they really want from you without you having to say, let's say, oh, I can guarantee you I'll never ever get sick, or something that you may not really feel comfortable saying. And if you find that your child is really getting stuck with those questions and just constantly asking on a loop over and over, one thing I recommend is setting up what I call a thought flush time. The idea here is that you would set aside maybe 5 to 10 minutes, maybe an hour or two before bedtime, where your child sits quietly by themselves and is allowed to let all of the scariest thoughts that they have in their head to be thought, and to let all the thoughts flood out, and to just think about them, to really let all the thoughts come out. And then when the 5-minute timer goes off, to literally picture it where all of the thoughts are flushing down the toilet, or something goofy like that. Something where they can picture themselves taking control of the thoughts, so the thoughts aren't controlling them. Instead, they are putting them in the toilet and flushing them away. And similarly, if during the day you notice them asking those questions a lot, you can remind them, oh, remember, though, you have to only think about those questions during the flush time. And you can, of course, reassure them just once, like we had said before, that I'm doing everything I can to stay safe, etc. And if they keep asking beyond that, they have to hold off the thoughts until and tell themselves, oh, I'll think about that thought during the flush time. And of course, building in a reward for doing that and for following through, because it's not easy to do it, can just further motivate them and help them feel some ownership over their own thoughts, which can be really helpful. So I hope these ideas can help make things a little bit easier at home, and I wish everyone the best of luck in these strange times.